that PoE 2 clip this morning was friggin' awesome. This is going to be a bit of a rundown. I've got some notes here around some things that are really cool and also some things that stick out as major improvements from PoE 1 and in fact most other ARPGs. The spirit system is really cool that they've featured, and also the hybrid casting. So essentially they're using minions instead of like corpses and things like that. You know, Detonate Dead is in a weird place right now. It's OP, but for the wrong reasons in PoE 1. And so one of the other comments I noted in the video as well is essentially every class will have some form of summon. But anyway, let's watch the video back and then we'll do a bit of a post-mortem over it. I know there's a lot of videos out there, but hey, this is my opinion and take of it, as I guess a player with too many hours to count. Anyway, let's get into it. Let's have a look at the video. And if you haven't already seen it, you can see it here. And I'll put a link to the original reveal anyway in the description below. And then we'll do a bit of a post-mortem. Anyway, I'll leave you guys to watch it and then we'll talk about it. Anyway, so this is footage that got released today. And we'll just sort of walk through this and we'll talk about some of the things that stick out and why they're major changes, why they're really good. I even wrote notes for this, so I'm not even going off the cuff for once.
I'm certainly not supposed to be here. How exciting.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Rogers, Game Director on Path of Exile 2, and I'm here today to talk about the Witch. Most classes have access to some kind of minion, but if you want to control an army, the Witch is probably the class you want to pick. In PoE...
So one thing that's really interesting before we get into this too is the Witch is like a hybrid occultist summoning class that uses the minions to actually cause damage too. Very similar to sacrifice skills in PoE 1, but just totally different in the way that it's approached, and also using minions to buff as opposed to using corpses to buff.
Most minions don't require summoning manually.
And that's an enormous improvement. So one of the biggest frustrations of pretty much any ARPG, Grim Dawn through to Last Epoch through to PoE 1, is you have to constantly keep summoning, but this actually lets you create a real minion army and focus on casting, which is a totally different way of playing a summoner, and it really hasn't been done very well. The only thing that I can think of that's very similar to this is the way that the Elementalist Ascendancy for Golems works already in PoE 1, and it's quite good, and I'm guessing that's where they sort of got the idea from.
This scepter gives me a couple of free warriors, but it's also going to give me another resource called Spirit, which you can spend on whatever minions you want. You can see the Spirit bar above the mana here. On the skill screen, you can pick the composition of your army.
So the other thing that Spirit does as well, as far as what we know, is it reserves auras. So to buff up your minions using auras, you're going to have to use Spirits. So to buff up stronger minions, you're going to have to use auras, right? Which means you're going to have less overall minions that you can summon at any one point in time. And the other thing that we don't know yet is how Spirit's going to be scaled up. So I'm assuming there's going to be gear that, like every attribute in the game or resource, where you're going to be able to upscale all of your Spirit and really juice the hell out of it.
This is a level 2 area, so I can only afford one other minion. I'll pick a sniper for now.
You can stay in the back with me.
When minions die, they'll be revived automatically so long as no other minion has died recently. So before your next battle, all your minions will come back to life.
Really cool.
You can also order your minions around with a dedicated button. Tell them to move to a specific location, attack a specific enemy, or even open a chest or door for you.
So that's basically the old signal prey gem that nobody uses in Path of Exile 1, and they've just done away with the entire targeting and relying solely on the minion AI, which is really good because it's one of the biggest frustrations of minions, especially when you're trying to take down bosses in PoE 1. Minions will sort of run around and focus on the ads, and then they won't attack the boss, which is a big problem. So this is actually a huge improvement as well.
We also have temporary minions. This spell is called Unearth. If it kills a monster or if it hits the corpse of a monster, it creates these bone constructs. They can't take many hits and have a limited lifetime, but you can build up a real army with these. While my minions are attacking, I'm going to use some debuffs on the monsters too. The first one I'm going to use here is Contagion. If a monster dies with Contagion, it spreads to nearby enemies.
So this is cool. So we don't know how this interaction is going to work with like poison on hit gems and support gems yet. And so if you can proc ailments, and I'm assuming you could do this with like Ignite, like Infernal Legion currently in PoE 1, you could probably do this with Ice and Lightning to proc shocks, and then basically power up damage with shock damage or shock out ailments. And who knows what other sort of attributes that you can apply and use with minions. And I'm assuming there's probably uniques that will give you completely unique interactions as well. That sort of makes sense based on the design play that they're going here. But it means that you could not focus so much on having to have minions proc, because you could cast it on the minions as far as ailments go, but you could focus on buffing up the damage from the ailments. So theoretically, you could make your minions and or any armies or summons significantly stronger than you ever could in Path of Exile 1.
Each time it spreads, the damage increases, so it's a good idea to try and keep the infection going. If any corpses are infected when you summon a minion from them, the minion will be infected as well. Each time they hit an enemy, they'll continue infecting them. It's nice to have an army of infected scorpions on your side. I also have another Chaos debuff called Essence Drain. This one does even more single target degen. If the monster is infected with Contagion at the same time, then the Essence Drain will spread as well.
This is just the old ED Contagion build, though. Like, there's nothing new about that. That is a mechanic that already exists in Path of Exile 1, but it's pretty much died in recent leagues because it doesn't scale very well. Though, you never know for next league.
This can turn into a real plague of destruction. Another minion type I can summon are zombies, but they require a corpse.
These will do nicely.
They don't come back to life if they die, but they're fairly tough and can bolster your minion numbers.
Yeah, and the best thing about that is like you're going to juice zombies up, so they're almost, well, they're relatively unkillable. So then you have all your other minions that are auto casting on death that act as adds, and then you put like super juicy zombies. So arguably, like, because what we'll see soon is you can do super zombies, which basically means that you could like super buff a single zombie and have a minion army of everything else spawning constantly, and that one zombie could just be like the Juggernaut sort of minion, which is awesome.
Many minions also have command skills. I can order my sniper to deploy a gas arrow on the battlefield to get some damage over time.
That's really cool.
Now I'm going to summon a skeletal arsonist. They can throw little fire grenades, but they also have a command skill that can detonate your own minions that are low on life. When you see the red indicator, use the skill and the minion will go boom. It's particularly nice on these bone constructs because they expire quickly anyway. So, let's take all these tools we found and fight the boss of this area, the Carrion Crone.
So the big thing here is it looks like a lot of the skills in PoE 2 have sort of diversified outcomes for the same skill gem, and that's a problem with things like trans gems and previously alt gems, where you had to have a different iteration of the gem to be able to get a different interaction. And so the way that this looks is that the gem just allows you to do multiple versions of the same gem within the same gem itself, and then you can buff up the gem and the abilities from the gems with the support gems underlying to that, and then have a lot of those skills and or switch around with those skills. So it's a pretty useful configuration, and actually it allows for way more flexibility in builds moving forwards, in particular because the focus is that you have a lot more active pressable skills moving forwards as well. One observation here is I noticed how quickly the health bar is going down compared to all the other showcases, and this is just in the first zone. So it almost looks like the balance is going to be in favor of the Necromancer, and the Necromancer is probably going to be the most abused skill or abused class in the entire game from what I can see with this. Like, look at them destroy that guy.
So, that's how many minions you can get at level 2. But let's see what minion gameplay looks like at a higher level. This is a level 30 area. I want to try a different group of minions. I still have my trusty warriors, but there's a lot of different types to choose from, like brutes for stunning or ice mages for freezing, and most of them come with their own special abilities or command skills.
See this, like, you have separate gems for every individual type of minion, which means you can buff them to all oblivion and just have an army that's built of diversified minions. The fact that you can get skeletal clerics, which means that you could self-heal everything with skeletons, and it really looks like they're focusing like skeleton army of darkness theme, but we don't know if AGs, or sorry, animate guardians are in the game. We don't know anything about golems. This doesn't cover off on golems. I'm assuming that there's a whole different class for golems. I don't necessarily think they're going to put that under the witch. I think that'll be like an elemancer or something like that, or a golemancer or something like that. And based on what we'll hear soon is that every class has its own summons. So I reckon there's going to be like Karui summons for like Karuri warriors and things like this. And these are things that they mentioned at the very first Exile Con that they would potentially be looking at as well. So I think this is just like a really small taste of what we're going to get from summons, because summoning in PoE 1 isn't very good.
Now I'd like a couple of storm mages to shock enemies, a cleric to heal and revive my minions, and a bunch of reavers as well.
So they'll probably
Reavers
be
do
ice
high
mages,
damage, and you can also
mages.
enrage them before battle. This slowly kills them, but my cleric should be able to keep them alive. While my minions are attacking, I can use channeled skills like Bone Storm, which creates a devastating volley of sharp spikes. The Storm Mage has a useful ability if lots of your minions die. He can summon a lightning storm to strike the location of every dead skeleton in your army. Just like that. We also have a type of skill called Offerings. These let you impale one of your skeletons on a big spike of bone in order to buff all of your other minions.
So the way, for anyone who doesn't know anything about PoE 1, offerings used to work on enemy corpses, and now they work on your own skeletons, and the advantage of that is you can self-perpetuate. The problem previously is you had to run like a desecrate setup to be able to get it to proc, otherwise if you had no corpses in a boss fight, you were sort of screwed.
The one I've just used here is called Pain Offering. It makes all of my other minions faster and deal more damage. After the battle, we have some extra corpses. We don't want those to go to waste. Profane Ritual consumes a corpse to create a power charge, which can power up some of my other spells. If I use them to summon zombies, I can create super zombies, which are more powerful.
And then I reckon you could probably do that with like specters, and because we'll see specters shortly too, so you could have super specters, super everything else.
Also don't need a corpse to summon them. I can also use power charges to channel Bone Storm. If I do that, it adds a devastating AoE. In PoE 2, even non-boss monsters can be pretty devastating, like this Faradin Impaler. There's a wide variety of abilities and is pretty tough to defeat. But maybe I can put the body to a better use. This is a Bind Spectre gem. Using it, I can take the body of any enemy and capture its spirit so that I can keep it as a minion. Any monster can be captured, but the spirit cost depends on how powerful the monster is.
So this is sort of like solo leveling almost sort of methodology. The more powerful the spectre, you actually get the power out of that spectre as the base sort of damage and base sort of health, which sort of works in PoE 1, but it's really like dulled down. I get the feeling here that the more spirit that you're reserving, the more powerful the minion, you have less minions, but you're going to have like this super juiced minion, which I was just saying earlier. And so there's going to be a focus on, well, maybe not having more minions will be the focus, but having like 3 massive like F-off minions is going to be the best possible outcome for certain builds, but we won't find that out until we see the end result as far as the end game goes and how spirit scales. The other thing is, like, again, how does spirit scale? Because potentially you could have an army of those bigger minions, or if you had like 5 to 6 on the field, which is probably about the sweet spot they're going to look for, and or you could have like 4 or 5 different types of specters as well on top of that, which you can do now, but damage outputting specters that complement each other, similar to, I guess, the way that co-op play works. You could have self-perpetuating damage specters that feed each other, and or chain feed the specters and into the last specter being the most powerful that gets a buff from the other however many specters. There's so many combinations that you could work with this. It's just totally different to PoE 1 in a lot of respects.
It takes a lot of spirit for such a powerful enemy, so I'll have to unsummon a lot of my other minions, but it certainly seems like it might be worth it.
Give me your essence.
If the Spectre dies, just like any other minion, it will respawn after a short time.
The specters look really cool in this game as well.
So, I think it's time to fight the boss of this area, Tor Gull the Defiler.
You are relentless, and that makes you predictable. The end of Marraketh's tyranny is nearly at hand.
So there's an observation that I keep making with their gameplay, right? So if we have a look at this, so this is that zone, right? Let's just have a look. I'll get my ugly mug out of the way. See the problem with what I see here, right? So these are all 1 sockets where there's potential for 3 sockets, right? And in a level 30 zone, so like what they're showing, and this was the same with Exile Con, it's the same with everything, right? They're showing this as like, and I think this is like a managing expectations sort of situation, but like realistically, by like level 30, you're gonna have this 3-linked, right? All of these minions are gonna be 3-linked. So there's no way, and I can't see what the actual like base skeletons are being spawned as, but definitely the clerics are storm mages. You're not going to be socketing 1 socket minion gems. So this is something that I noticed over and over again in their clips, and I feel like they want to let on that the game's going to be harder than what it actually is going to be. And it's just it's the observation that I keep noticing, and the biggest problem that I see with I guess, this approach is that like people are going to look at this and go, it's really, really hard. I don't think the game is going to be as hard as what they're making it out to be, because once you start to link this up on a 3 link by like level 30, that's going to be quite powerful considering the number of minions you've got. And also the survivability of the minions is going to go up. Their ability to buff, like with the clerics, is going to go up. So this is just one thing that I thought I'd just coin out as part of this video, that sort of this isn't like a true representation of what it's going to look like when you actually play minions. Your minions are probably going to be more cracked than what you can even see here, which is actually a good outcome. But I guess it's not a bad approach either, because it's managing expectations so people don't get too carried away. But that also begs the question, like at level 30, if you're running one sort of links and you're doing that much sort of output damage and you can sustain through the game, then what's the end game going to look like? And is it going to be significantly harder than what we're seeing here and comparable to like PoE 1 on when it first launched, where basically you would get nuked by map bosses? And the other thing is, like, you know, what's the difficulty level of getting these 6 sockets in here? In PoE 1, for a very long time, you had issues getting anything greater than 4 to 5 sockets. So 6 links going to be like the new Mage Blood? Probably not. But how rare are 6 links going to be on these gems? Who knows? These are some of the questions that sort of come to mind when I look at the game like this. But yeah, anyway, that's the gameplay. So I thought I'd just do a quick rundown of some other comments here. So as a bit of a summary, just off the back of what we learned from the video today, number one, minions are going to be off the chains. It's going to be awesome. You're actually going to be able to live that minion army summoner, army of darkness sort of approach. You sort of look like the Night King out of Game of Thrones, to be honest with you, with the way that the skeletons and stuff like that spawn, which I thought was really cool. And it's like that fantasy of being a necromancer that everybody wants to play. So they really hit the nail on the head. I don't think I've ever seen a minion build configuration that looks anywhere near what PoE 2 is offering. So I think it's fantastic and actually makes me pumped to play minions. And I'm not really a big minion player either. But I still am going to be going after the Templar. I reckon that's going to be the best class, but you know, that's my opinion. Spirit management is going to be really good. So not having to reserve mana for auras and having to cast minions with mana moving forwards is a huge advantage. Lets you focus on actually casting skills and playing the game, as opposed to Tetris with the mana bar, which has always been an absolute nightmare in Path of Exile 1. Like the amount of reservation efficiency that you need to stack up to get builds to work, especially with minions, can be completely untenable and just super expensive and unapproachable. So this is a really good way of dealing with something that's been a huge issue. And I know that's come up in both interviews and both past discussions with the developers at GGG as well, around their dissatisfaction with mana efficiency. So they sort of reservation efficiency, sorry. So they've sort of addressed that issue with this. Not needing to actively summon base minions is super useful, especially those of us who sort of don't like pressing too many buttons. And then console players, that's going to be really user-friendly as well with controller configurations as well. So you'll be more focused on casting spells and having your minions available to be casting more powerful spells than you are going to be on just raw casting minions, which is just an enormous advantage. The other thing I noticed is going to be empowering skills through minion sacrifice and not corpse sacrifice moving forward. So moving away from having enemy corpses on the ground, and I'm sure there will be skills like that, but it's more focused on self-perpetuating empowerment of skills as opposed to relying on corpses on the ground, which can be limiting if you're fighting bosses. This makes more sense in particular if you are going to be fighting bosses that you're not going to have the ability to respawn on. You're going to have to redo if you lose. So you can stay in the fight for longer. So it's going to be more about skill and time management, minion management, than it's going to be around just having an absolutely overwhelming army and throw that at the wall, basically, which is how PoE 1 works. So that's a huge advantage. Also, having conditional summoning, as I like to call it. So being able to summon super minions based on certain attributes being met. I find that really cool, and I reckon there's going to be some really awesome combinations that come out of that. Lastly, just that observation that I made during the video around other classes potentially having the ability to have a summon in each class sort of seems like a cool concept. I'm super keen to see what they do with golems at this stage, because golems for a long time, at one point, carrion golem was one of the most popular golem builds in PoE, and at one point even stone golem was heavily used in delve. That was a delving meta. And ever since, it's not been very good in Path of Exile, and so minions have sort of dropped off after the gearing changes, and it looks like this is taking a pitch from a completely different direction, which is awesome. The other thing is I want to see whether or not the warrior has the ability to summon Karui warriors, which would make sense that you could do that in Path of Exile too, but that's soon to be seen. I reckon we're going to hopefully see some more of this sort of summoning stuff as we go, and it'd be really cool to see some more endgame. Anyway, if you like this video, I know it's a bit rough compared to my usual videos. Don't forget to drop a like, don't forget to drop a sub to the channel, and I also stream on Twitch every other day. I'm going to be doing more videos like this moving forwards, and you would have noticed a bit of cleanup on the channel. I'm sort of refining the content moving forwards and coming up with a better plan. And later in the week, the Twitch VOD channel is going to be up as well. So for those of you who like the Twitch VODs, because I usually have some mad beats on in the background, they'll be available as well. So don't forget to check that out, and I'll release that later in the week. Anyway, I'll see you guys later on, and hopefully we get some more reveals before the weekend hits.